They called him the Ice King of New York real estate. Dominic Vance didn't do emotions, and he certainly didn't do failure. But on a rainy Tuesday in October, inside the most exclusive restaurant in Manhattan, Dominic was failing. His 6-month-old son, Henry, was screaming, a guttural, terrified shriek that silenced the entire room. Nannies panicked. Patrons glared. Dominic looked ready to shatter. Then, a 23-year-old waitress named Sarah, who had 0 childcare experience and $40 in her bank account, walked past security. She didn't pick the baby up. She didn't offer a bottle. She just leaned down and whispered 4 words that changed everything. What she saw that night wasn't just a crying baby. It was a crime scene in plain sight. This is the story of how a waitress exposed a billionaire's darkest secret. The shift started like any other at the Gilded Lily, a restaurant so pretentious that they didn't put prices on the menu, because if you had to ask, you definitely couldn't afford the risotto. Sarah Miller adjusted her apron, trying to hide the fraying hem. She was tired, not just end of a shift tired, but bone deep, 2 jobs and nursing school. Tired. At 23, Sarah was invisible. To the customers, she was just a pair of hands delivering sparkling water and removing crumb-laden plates. "Table 4 is VIP," the manager, frantic and sweating, hissed at her. "Don't mess this up, Miller. It's Dominic Vance." The kitchen went quiet. Everyone knew the name. Dominic Vance, the CEO of Vance Global, a man who bought skyscrapers the way normal people bought groceries. Rumor had it his wife had died in a tragic car accident 6 months ago, leaving him with a newborn heir and a heart made of reinforced concrete. When Sarah walked out to the floor, the atmosphere was already tense. Dominic Vance sat at the best table by the window, but he wasn't looking at the view. He was staring at his phone, his jaw tight. Across from him sat a woman who looked more like a model than a caregiver. Greta, the nanny, and in a high-tech stroller next to her was the baby. Henry. And Henry was screaming. It wasn't a fuss, it wasn't a whimper. It was a high-pitched, lung-shredding scream of pure panic. "Can you shut him up?" Dominic snapped, not looking up from his phone. "I have the Japanese investors calling in 10 minutes. Greta looked flustered, smoothing her pencil skirt. "I'm trying, Mr. Vance. He's being difficult today. He refused the bottle." She jostled the stroller aggressively. "Hush, Henry! Stop it!" The baby screamed louder. The entire restaurant was staring. A couple at table 2 rolled their eyes. The ambiance was ruined. Sarah approached cautiously with the water pitcher. As she poured, she watched the nanny. Greta wasn't comforting the child. She was pinching the bridge of her nose, looking annoyed. Then she reached into her oversized designer bag and pulled out a pacifier. She shoved it into the baby's mouth with a force that made Sarah flinch. Henry spat it out and gasped for air, his face turning a terrifying shade of violet. "God, he's impossible," Greta muttered. "Mr. Vance, maybe we should just send him to the car with the driver." Dominic slammed his phone onto the table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "He is my son, not a piece of luggage, Greta. Pick him up." Greta sighed, her long, manicured nails digging into the baby's underarms as she hoisted him up. Henry's screams shifted from panic to pain. He arched his back, trying to get away from her. "He hates me," Dominic said, his voice hollow. For a second, the billionaire mask slipped. He looked exhausted. "He hates everyone." Sarah had finished pouring the water. She should have walked away. The rules of the Gilded Lily were strict. Never speak to VIPs unless spoken to. But Sarah saw something. She saw the way the baby's eyes were wide and fixed, not on his father, but on the empty space above him. She saw the way his tiny hands were trembling. She stepped forward, Sir? Dominic looked up, his eyes like chips of blue ice. What? He's not being difficult, Sarah said, her voice shaking slightly but gaining strength. He's terrified. Greta scoffed. Excuse me? You're a waitress. Go get the bread basket. Look at his hands, Sarah said, ignoring the nanny and pointing at Henry. He's clenching his fist so hard his knuckles are white. And he's not looking at you, or her. He's looking at the lights. Dominic frowned, looking up at the massive crystal chandelier hanging directly above the table. It was beautiful, but one of the crystals was catching the strobe of a passing ambulance outside, flickering intensely. And, Sarah continued, stepping closer, he's overstimulated. The perfume. What? Greta snapped. You're wearing Midnight Rose, Sarah said. It's strong. It's got a heavy musk base. My little brother had sensory processing issues. Strong scents combined with flickering lights felt like physical pain to him. Sarah didn't wait for permission. She set the water pitcher down. May I? Dominic didn't say yes, but he didn't say no. He just watched, stunned. Sarah leaned down to the screaming child. She didn't pick him up. She didn't shush him. She simply blocked his view of the chandelier with her body, creating a shadow. Then she leaned close to his ear, below the cloud of the nanny's perfume, and whispered, It's okay, little man. It's just noise. I've got the shadow for you. She hummed a low, vibrating note, a hum she used to use for her brother. The effect was instantaneous. Henry's back unarched, the screaming cut off, replaced by a jagged, wet hiccup. He blinked, his tear-filled eyes focusing on Sarah's plain face, devoid of makeup, devoid of sharp jewelry. She smelled like soap and bread. The silence in the restaurant was deafening. Greta stood there, mouth agape. Dominic Vance looked from his son to the waitress, his expression unreadable. He stopped, Dominic whispered. He was just scared, Sarah said softly, straightening up. The world is big and loud when you're that small. She grabbed her tray, suddenly terrified she had overstepped. I'll go get the appetizers. Wait, Dominic commanded. Sarah froze. Dominic stood up. He was tall, towering over the table. He looked at Greta. You're fired, Greta gasped. And Mr. Vance, you can't be serious. Because of a waitress? I'm certified by the Norland College. You've been with him for 3 months, and you didn't notice the lights were hurting him, Dominic said, cold, his voice low and dangerous. Pack your things. The driver will take you home. He turned to Sarah. What is your name? Sarah. Sarah Miller. Sarah Miller, Dominic repeated, as if memorizing a stock ticker symbol. How much do you make here? Minimum wage plus tips. Sir. I'll triple it, Dominic said. Start tonight. You're coming with me. Sarah blinked. Excuse me? My son likes you. He hates everyone else. I need a nanny. You're hired. I can't, Sarah stammered. I have school. I have exams next week. I'm not a nanny. Dominic Vance pulled a business card from his jacket pocket and slid it across the white tablecloth. It was heavy, black cardstock with gold embossing. Everybody has a price, Sarah, he said. Think about yours. Be at this address tomorrow at 8 a.m. or don't. But if you don't, you're leaving a helpless child with, well, people like Greta. He picked up the car seat carrier himself, something he had never done before, and walked out of the restaurant, leaving $1,000 in cash on the table. Sarah stood there, her heart hammering against her ribs. She didn't know it then, but accepting that card would be the most dangerous thing she ever did. The address on the card led to the penthouse of the Vance Spire, a glass needle piercing the Chicago skyline. Sarah had barely slept. She had spent the night debating, She was a nursing student. She wanted to work in a hospital, not change diapers for a billionaire. But the image of baby Henry's terrified face haunted her. And then there was the money. Tripling her salary meant paying off her student loans. It meant getting her mum into a better assisted living facility. She stood in the private elevator, watching the numbers climb. 50, 60, 70, penthouse. The doors slid open, revealing a foyer larger than her entire apartment. The floor was marble, polished to a mirror shine. A woman was waiting for her. She was in her 50s, wearing a severe grey suit, holding a clipboard. This was Mrs. Higgins, the household manager. "You're late," Mrs. Higgins said, though the clock on the wall read 7:59 a.m. Shoes off. Put these on." She tossed a pair of disposable slippers at Sarah. "Mr. Vance requires absolute sterility in the nursery. Follow me." The apartment was cold, not temperature-wise, but emotionally. There were no photos on the walls, no toys on the floor, just expensive modern art and furniture that looked uncomfortable to sit on. They walked down a long corridor. "Rules," Mrs. Higgins recited, walking briskly. 1. You do not speak to Mr. Vance unless he speaks to you. 2. You do not have guests. 3. You sign the non-disclosure agreement before you even see the child. 4. No cell phones in the nursery. She stopped at a heavy oak door. And 5. Do not trust the family. Sarah frowned. "What?" Mrs. Higgins didn't blink. "Mr. Vance has extended family. They visit. They have opinions. You work for Mr. Vance. Only Mr. Vance. Do you understand?" "Yes," Sarah said, a chill running down her spine. They entered the nursery. It was a high-tech wonderland. Monitors, temperature regulators, a crib that probably cost more than a car. Henry was in a playpen in the corner. He was crying again, but softly this time. A low, miserable whimper. Dominic was there, pacing. He was on the phone, pacing back and forth in a track that looked worn into the expensive rug. "I don't care what the board says, Julian," Dominic shouted into the phone. "I want the merger done by Friday." He hung up, running a hand through his hair. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He saw Sarah. His shoulders dropped about an inch. "You came." "I came to see if he's okay," Sarah said, stepping past Mrs. Higgins. She walked to the playpen. Henry looked up. His face was red and blotchy. As soon as he saw Sarah, he stopped crying. He reached out a chubby hand. Sarah's heart melted. She picked him up. He was heavy, warm, and smelled of baby powder. And something else. Sarah sniffed the baby's onesie. It was a subtle smell. Acrid. Like burned plastic. "What is he wearing?" Sarah asked, turning to Mrs. Higgins. "Imported organic cotton, hand-washed," Mrs. Higgins said defensively. Sarah frowned. She checked the back of the baby's neck. It was red and irritated. "Mr. Vance," Sarah said. "Do you smoke?" Dominic looked offended. "Of course not. It's lethal for the baby." "Does anyone in this house smoke?" "No one," Mrs. Higgins insisted. "Then why does this baby smell like stale cigarette smoke and cheap lighter fluid?" Sarah asked. Dominic froze. He walked over, invading Sarah's personal space, and leaned in to smell his son. He inhaled deeply. His eyes widened. "I don't smell it." "It's faint," Sarah admitted, "but it's there, and his skin is reacting to it. Someone held him recently. Someone who smokes heavy chains and tries to cover it up with mints." Dominic turned to Mrs. Higgins. "Who has been in here this morning?" Only Miss Isabella, sir," Mrs. Higgins stammered, looking pale. She came to drop off a gift. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Isabella," Dominic whispered the name with a mix of dread and anger. "Who is Isabella?" Sarah asked. "My sister-in-law," Dominic said, his jaw tightening. My late wife's sister. She wants custody of Henry." Sarah held the baby tighter. Why would she handle him if she smells like smoke? "She doesn't smoke," Dominic said firmly. "Isabella is a fitness influencer. Her brand is purity and health. She would never smoke." "Then the smell is coming from somewhere else," Sarah said, her nursing instincts kicking in. "Or someone is lying." Dominic looked at Sarah, really looked at her, assessing her value. "Sarah," he said, "I'm doubling the offer. Triple was for the nanny work. The extra is for security." "Security? I think someone is trying to hurt my son," Dominic said, his voice cracking slightly. "The doctors say he has failure to thrive. They say he's just a sickly baby. But you walked in and fixed him in 5 minutes. You notice things. I need your eyes." He walked to a safe in the wall, punched in a code, and pulled out a thick document. "This is the contract. You live here. You watch him 24/7. You eat what he eats to test it. And you find out why my son is screaming." Sarah looked down at Henry. He had fallen asleep in her arms, his tiny hand clutching the fabric of her cheap t-shirt. He felt safe. If she said no, she'd go back to the restaurant. Back to debt. And Henry would be left with people who couldn't smell the smoke. "I'll do it," Sarah said. "Good," Dominic said. "Because Isabella is coming for dinner tonight, and she's bringing her own doctor." The penthouse transformed as the sun set. The floor-to-ceiling windows, which had offered a bright, terrifying view of the Chicago drop earlier, now reflected the interior lights like black mirrors. Sarah stood in the nursery, nervously smoothing the front of the navy blue scrub top Mrs. Higgins had provided. It was a uniform, a way to remind her. You are staff. You are not family. "They're here," Mrs. Higgins announced via the intercom, her voice tight. Dominic walked into the nursery a moment later. He had changed from his business suit into a charcoal sweater and dark slacks, but he looked no less armored. "Bring Henry," Dominic said. "Isabella insists on seeing him before dinner. Stay close. If he starts crying, you step in. I don't care if she's the Queen of England." Sarah nodded, picking up Henry. The baby was calm now, clutching a soft blanket Sarah had brought from her own apartment, something that didn't smell like dry cleaning chemicals. They walked out to the main living area. Isabella Thorne was waiting by the fireplace. She was breathtaking, tall, with the kind of glossy, impossibly straight blonde hair that looked like spun gold. She wore a white cashmere dress that cost more than Sarah's entire nursing school tuition. Beside her stood a man in a sharp suit, holding a leather medical bag. "Dominic," Isabella said, her voice like silk wrapped around a razor blade. She didn't hug him. She just offered a cheek, which he didn't kiss. "Isabella," Dominic replied stiffly. Isabella's eyes immediately darted to Sarah and then to the baby. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second before returning, brighter and colder than before. "And this must be the new—" "Help," Isabella said, looking Sarah up and down with amused disdain. "A waitress, I heard. From the Gilded Lily. That's quaint." "Sarah is a nursing student," Dominic corrected, his voice flat. "She specializes in pediatric care." "Of course," Isabella purred. She reached out for the baby. "Give me my nephew. I've missed my little Henry." Sarah hesitated. She felt Henry's body tense up in her arms. The baby knew this woman, and he didn't like her. "Hand him over, Sarah," Dominic said softly, though his eyes warned her to be ready. Sarah passed the baby to Isabella. Immediately, Henry let out a sharp gasp. He didn't scream yet, but his eyes went wide, filled with that same terror Sarah had seen in the restaurant. "Oh, look at you," Isabella cooed, bouncing him aggressively. "You look so pale, Henry. Dominic, He looks anemic. Dr. Sterling, doesn't he look anemic? The man beside her stepped forward. Dr. Marcus Sterling was handsome in a slimy way, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He does look undernourished, Dr. Sterling agreed, pulling a penlight from his pocket and shining it directly into Henry's eyes without warning. Henry screamed. It was the same shriek from the restaurant. Pain. Fear. Shh. Shh. Stop that, Isabella snapped, her voice dropping the sweet act for a split second. She jiggled him harder. He's so temperamental, just like his mother was toward the end. Dominic flinched. Don't bring Veronica into this. I'm just saying, Isabella sighed, looking at Sarah with mock sympathy. My sister had mental struggles. It's genetic, you know. Poor Henry probably has her instability. He's not unstable, Sarah said. The words came out before she could stop them. The room went silent. Isabella turned her head slowly to look at Sarah. Excuse me? He's not unstable, Sarah repeated, her heart pounding. He's overstimulated. And Dr. Sterling shone a bright light into his eyes without dimming the room first. That hurts. Isabella laughed, a dry, tinkling sound. Dr. Sterling is the head of pediatrics at St. Jude's private wing. I think he knows more than a waitress who reads WebMD. Actually, Dr. Sterling said, stepping closer to Sarah, looming over her. The child shows signs of sensory processing disorder, likely caused by poor maternal bonding. He needs structure. Medication. I have a prescription here for a mild sedative to help him sleep through the night. He doesn't need sedatives, Dominic said, stepping between the doctor and Sarah. He needs peace. He needs a mother, Isabella said pointedly. Which is why I'm filing the petition again, Dominic. You're a CEO. You're never home. You're hiring random girls from restaurants to raise your heir. It's negligent. I am home, Dominic growled. For now, Isabella said. She reached into her oversized purse, the same brand the fired nanny, Greta, had carried. I brought him a gift, since you won't let me take him. She pulled out a plush toy. It was a bear, but it looked high-tech. It had glowing eyes and a mechanical box in its chest. It's a sleepy time bear, Isabella explained. It plays white noise and mimics a heartbeat. Veronica wanted him to have one. She shoved the bear into the crook of Henry's arm. Henry went rigid. He didn't just cry, he thrashed, trying to push the bear away. He hates it, Sarah said, reaching out. Leave it, Isabella commanded. He needs to learn to self-soothe. Come, Dominic. Dinner is getting cold. Isabella turned and walked toward the dining room. Dominic looked at Sarah. He looked torn, but he had to play the game. Keep him in the nursery, Dominic whispered to Sarah. Check the bear. If it looks dangerous, throw it in the trash. He followed Isabella. Sarah took Henry back into the nursery. The baby was hyperventilating. She immediately took the bear from him. It was heavy. Heavier than a toy should be. She sniffed it. There it was again. That smell. It wasn't just on the baby this time. It was coming from the bear. It smelled like burning ozone and bitter almonds. Sarah turned the bear over. There was no zipper. The battery pack was screwed shut with proprietary screws. She pressed the button on the paw. A low, rhythmic, thumping sound started. Thump, 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 thump. To an adult, it sounded like a heartbeat. But Sarah leaned closer. Underneath the heartbeat, there was a high-pitched whine. It was barely audible, like a dog whistle. She looked at Henry. He was covering his ears with his tiny hands, his face scrunched in pain. Sarah shut the bear off. Henry instantly relaxed, his hands dropping. You're not crazy, little man, Sarah whispered, a cold realization washing over her. They're hurting you on purpose. The next 3 days were a blur of tension. Isabella didn't leave. She claimed she was staying in the guest suite to monitor the transition. Sarah barely slept. She had hidden the bear in the back of the closet, wrapped in 3 blankets to muffle any sound it might make on its own. She didn't trust it. Dominic was distant, locked in meetings with his lawyers during the day, and enduring Isabella's psychological warfare at dinner. But every night, around 2 a.m., he would come to the nursery. He would sit in the rocking chair, watching Sarah feed Henry. They didn't talk much, but the silence was companionable. He watched the way Sarah burped the baby, the way she hummed to him. "You're good at this," Dominic said on the 3rd night. His voice was rough with exhaustion. "He's a good baby," Sarah said. "He just needs to know he's safe." "Is he safe?" Dominic asked, looking at her intensely. "With me?" "He's safe with you," Sarah said. "It's the people around you I'm worried about." Dominic sighed, rubbing his temples. "Isabella, she's family. I promised Veronica I'd take care of her." "Does taking care of her mean letting her hurt your son?" Dominic looked up sharply. "You think she's hurting him?" "The bear," Sarah said. "It emits a high-frequency sound. I think it gives him migraines. And Dr. Sterling, I looked him up. He's not a pediatrician. He's a psychiatrist. He specializes in behavioral modification for troubled youth." Dominic's face darkened. "Are you sure?" Before Sarah could finish, the nursery door burst open. It was Isabella, and she wasn't alone. Dr. Sterling was with her, and 2 men in security uniforms. "There she is!" Isabella shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at Sarah. "Get her away from my nephew." "What is going on?" Dominic stood up, placing himself between Sarah and the intruders. "She's poisoning him," Isabella cried, tears streaming down her face. It was a perfect performance. "I found the bottle in the kitchen. She's been spiking his formula with antifreeze." "What?" Sarah gasped, clutching Henry tighter. "That's insane." Dr. Sterling stepped forward, holding a baby bottle in a plastic evidence bag. "We tested the residue in the sink, Mr. Vance. It tested positive for ethylene glycol. Sweet to the taste, odorless and lethal. It explains the lethargy, the crying." "I never—" Sarah started, panic rising in her throat. "Give me the boy," Dr. Sterling commanded. "No." Sarah backed away. "Dominic, look at me. I didn't do this." "You know I didn't do this." Dominic looked at the bottle. He looked at Isabella, who was sobbing into a handkerchief. Then he looked at Sarah. Sarah saw the doubt in his eyes. He was a man of logic, and the evidence was right there. But she also saw the desperation. "Dominic," Sarah pleaded, "why would I hurt him? I'm the only one who got him to stop crying. The bear. Ask her about the bear." "He's hallucinating," Isabella sobbed. "She's gaslighting you, Dominic, just like the staff did to Veronica. Please, before Henry dies." Dominic closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, they were cold. "Take the baby," Dominic said to the security guards. "No!" Sarah screamed as a guard ripped Henry from her arms. The baby began to wail, reaching for her. "Escort Ms. Miller out of the building," Dominic said, turning his back on her. "If she returns, call the police." "Dominic, please! Check the bear! Check the frequencies!" Sarah yelled as the guards grabbed her arms. She was dragged out of the nursery, down the long marble hallway, and shoved into the elevator. The doors closed on Isabella's triumphant smirk. Sarah was thrown out onto the street in front of the Vance spire. It was raining again. She had no coat, no purse, just her scrubs and the slippers. She stood there, shivering, watching the penthouse lights far above. She had lost. Henry was up there with a woman who used sound waves to torture him, and a doctor who framed innocent people. She reached into her pocket. She expected to find nothing, Instead, her fingers brushed against a piece of paper. She pulled it out. It was a napkin from the nursery, folded into a tight square. She unfolded it under the street lamp. It was Dominic's handwriting, scrawled hastily, probably when he had turned his back on her. "Find the proof. You have 24 hours before I have to sign the custody papers. Go to 42 West Oakhaven. Ask for Badger." Sarah stared at the note. He hadn't fired her. He had staged it. He knew the house was bugged. He knew Isabella was watching. He needed her on the outside. A black sedan pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down. It wasn't a limo. It was a beat-up Ford Taurus. "You Sarah?" the driver asked. He looked like an ex-boxer, nose broken in 3 places. "Who are you?" "I'm Badger," the man grunted. "Boss said you need a ride to the lab. Get in. We got a bear to dissect." Sarah looked back at the tower one last time. Then she opened the car door. "Let's go," she said. "We're going to burn that witch down." The Ford Taurus smelled of stale coffee and old leather, a stark contrast to the sterile, ozone-scented air of the Vance penthouse. Badger drove with a terrifying efficiency, weaving through the rain-slicked streets of Chicago toward an industrial district that most tourists pretended didn't exist. "You got the bear?" Badger grunted, not taking his eyes off the road. "What?" Sarah blinked, still shivering in her scrubs. "No, I hid it in the closet. I told you they threw me out." Badger smirked. He reached into the glove compartment and tossed a heavy object into her lap. It was the bear. "Boss isn't stupid," Badger said. "When he hugged you goodbye, that awkward pat on the back, he slipped the tracker key into your pocket. But I grabbed the bear from the laundry chute. He dropped it down there 10 minutes before the bust." Sarah stared at the plush toy. Its mechanical eyes seemed to mock her. "Dominic knew. He knew she was setting me up." "He suspected," Badger corrected. "He knows Isabella plays dirty. If he had defended you back there, she would have called Child Protective Services immediately. She had them on speed dial. By firing you, he bought us time. But not much. The emergency custody hearing is at 9 a.m. tomorrow." They pulled up to a nondescript warehouse. Badger led her inside. It wasn't a standard office. It was a high-tech lab that looked like a cross between a mechanic's garage and a server room. "This is where Dominic tests the real tech," Badger explained. "The stuff the public doesn't see for another 10 years. He tossed the bear onto a metal workbench and grabbed a scalpel. "Let's see what makes Mr. Cuddles tick." Sarah watched as Badger surgically removed the bear's synthetic fur. Underneath the stuffing wasn't just a simple sound box. It was a complex circuit board with a small, black antenna. "That's not a white noise machine," Badger muttered, adjusting his magnifying goggles. "That's a dual-band receiver and transmitter." "A transmitter?" Sarah asked, leaning in. "You mean a bug?" "A bug that works 2 ways, Badger said. "It sends audio out, so she could hear everything happening in the nursery. But it also receives signals. Look at this coil." He pointed to a copper spiral. "This generates an ultrasonic pulse, 18 to 20 kilohertz. The dog whistle," Sarah realized. That's why Henry was screaming. She was blasting him with sound waves that adults can't hear, but are excruciating for a baby. "Exactly. And look at the timing log," Badger said, hooking the chip up to his computer. A graph appeared on the screen. Every time Dominic entered the room, the frequency turned off. Every time he left, it turned on. She was conditioning the baby to associate his father's absence with pain. Sarah felt sick. She wanted Henry to hate him. She wanted Dominic to think he was a failure. "There's more," Badger said. He pulled up a chemical analysis report on the main screen. I swiped the bottle Sterling bagged as evidence, the antifreeze bottle. It was positive for ethylene glycol, Sarah said, her voice trembling. They said I did it. It was positive, Badger agreed. But here's the kicker. The residue was only on the outside of the nipple. The formula inside was clean. Sarah gasped. They dipped it. Sterling dipped the nipple in antifreeze right before he bagged it, Badger confirmed. If the baby had actually drunk it, he would be in a coma by now. Henry was alert when they took him. Scared, but alert. It was a frame job, plain and simple. Sarah looked at the clock on the wall. It was 4 a.m. We have 5 hours, Sarah said, her nursing fatigue replaced by a cold, hard rage. We have the bear. We have the toxicology report. Is it enough? Badger hesitated. He looked at the bear again. It proves abuse. It proves fraud. But Isabella, she's smart. She'll say she bought a defective toy. She'll say Sterling made a mistake in the field test. We need something that links her directly to the intent. We need a confession. She won't confess, Sarah said. She thinks she's untouchable. She thinks she's watching you, Badger said, tapping the bear's microphone. The transmitter is still active. Sarah looked at the bear. A plan formed in her mind. It was reckless. It was dangerous. Dominic would probably hate it. Is she listening right now? Sarah asked. Probably, Badger said. She's likely celebrating with a glass of wine, monitoring the channels to make sure you've disappeared. Sarah picked up the bear. She held it close to her face. Badger, she said, loud enough for the microphone to pick up. I'm going to the safe house. I have the diary. Badger looked at her, confused. He mouthed, What diary? Sarah winked at him and continued speaking to the bear. Veronica's diary, the one she hid in the nursery baseboard before she died. It says everything about Isabella, about the car accident. If the judge sees this... She made a show of zipping a bag. I'm going to stash it at the bus station locker. Then I'm leaving town. She signaled Badger to cut the feed. Badger killed the power to the bear. There is no diary, he said flatly. No, Sarah said, but Isabella doesn't know that. And if she's as paranoid as I think she is, she won't be able to resist coming to get it. You want to bait her, Badger said, a slow grin spreading across his face. You want to lure her out before court. I want to catch her, Sarah said. Can you rig this place with cameras? Badger cracked his knuckles. Honey, this building has more eyes than the CIA. Let's set the trap. The family court of Cook County was a dreary place, smelling of floor wax and broken dreams. But courtroom 4B was packed. The press was there. Isabella had leaked the story. Billionaire CEO neglects heir. Nanny caught poisoning child. It was the headline of the morning. Dominic sat at the defendant's table. He looked immaculate in a navy suit, but his eyes were hollow. He checked his watch every 30 seconds. Isabella sat across the aisle, radiating grieving elegance in a black dress. Dr. Sterling sat beside her, looking solemn. All rise, the bailiff droned. Judge Eleanor Vance, no relation, a cruel irony, swept in. She was known as the Iron Gavel. She didn't suffer fools, and she hated media circuses. We are here for the emergency custody hearing regarding Henry Vance, the judge said. Ms. Thorne, you are the petitioner. Isabella's lawyer, a shark named Cartwright, stood up. Your Honor, the facts are simple and horrifying. Mr. Vance has delegated the care of his fragile son to a revolving door of unqualified staff. Yesterday, a woman with no background checks, picked up from a restaurant, was caught attempting to poison the child with antifreeze. We have the toxicology report. We have the testimony of Dr. Sterling. He placed the papers on the judge's bench. The judge read them, her frown deepening. She looked at Dominic. "Mr. Vance," she said, "these allegations are criminal. Why shouldn't I grant immediate custody to the aunt and issue a warrant for your arrest for endangerment?" Dominic stood up. "Your Honor, the woman in question, Sarah Miller, was not poisoning my son. She was saving him. Saving him with antifreeze?" Cartwright scoffed. "I request a recess," Dominic said. "My key witness is running late." "This isn't a TV show, Mr. Vance," the judge snapped. "You have no witness. You have a poisoned bottle and a screaming child. Unless you have substantial evidence to refute this report right now, I am signing this order." Isabella covered her mouth, feigning a sob of relief. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom banged open. "Your Honor!" The entire room turned. Sarah Miller stood there. She looked exhausted, her scrubs replaced by a borrowed, oversized blazer, but she held her head high. Badger was right behind her, carrying a laptop and a large metal case. "This is the woman!" Isabella shrieked, jumping up. "Officer, arrest her! She tried to kill my nephew!" Two bailiffs moved toward Sarah. "Wait!" Dominic shouted, his voice booming across the room. "Let her speak!" "I have new evidence," Sarah announced, ignoring the bailiffs. "Evidence that proves Miss Thorne and Dr. Sterling fabricated the poisoning and have been systematically torturing Henry Vance." The courtroom erupted. The judge banged her gavel. "Silence! You step forward. You have 2 minutes before I hold you in contempt." Sarah walked to the front. Badger set up the laptop and plugged it into the court's projection system. "Your Honor," Sarah said. "Exhibit A, the Sleepy Time Bear." On the screen, the schematic of the bear appeared. "This toy, given by Ms. Thorne, contains an ultrasonic emitter," Sarah explained. "It blasts 20 kilohertz sound waves directly into the child's ear. It causes pain, nausea, and terror." "Objection!" Cartwright yelled. "This is pseudoscience." "We have the frequency logs," Sarah continued, nodding to Badger. He hit a key. A graph appeared, showing the timestamps. The device was remotely activated every time the father, Dominic Vance, entered the room. It was designed to make the child fear his father. Isabella's face went pale. She whispered something furious to Dr. Sterling. "Exhibit B," Sarah said. "The video from 5 a.m. this morning." The screen changed. It was black and white footage from inside the warehouse. It showed Isabella Thorne breaking a window and climbing in. She was wearing a trench coat, looking frantic. She began tearing through a locker marked Diary. When she found it empty, she pulled out her phone. The audio from the warehouse surveillance boomed through the courtroom speakers. Isabella's voice on recording. "Sterling, the diary isn't here. If that little waitress finds out about the brake lines on Veronica's car, we're done. We need to find her and shut her up before court." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Even the stenographer stopped typing. Isabella stood frozen. The color drained from her face until she looked like a wax statue. "Brake lines?" Dominic whispered. He turned slowly to look at Isabella. "Veronica's accident wasn't an accident. It's a deep fake," Isabella screamed, her voice cracking. "AI! They used AI to fake my voice." "Is it?" Sarah asked. She pulled a plastic bag from her pocket. Inside was a piece of fabric. "Because you cut your hand on the glass when you broke in. We have your blood at the scene. The police are processing it right now." Badger stepped forward and placed a USB drive on the judge's bench. "This drive contains the raw footage, the frequency analysis of the bear, and the unedited security logs from the penthouse showing Dr. Sterling dipping the bottle nipple into a cup of antifreeze he brought in his own pocket." Judge Vance looked at Isabella. Her expression was one of pure disgust. "Bailiff," the judge said, her voice like granite. Take Ms. Thorne and Dr. Sterling into custody immediately. I am referring this to the district attorney for charges of child abuse, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder." "No!" Isabella screamed as the officers grabbed her. "You can't! I'm a Thorne! Dominic, tell them! She's lying!" Dr. Sterling didn't even fight. He slumped in his chair, defeated. Dominic didn't look at Isabella. He looked at Sarah. He walked across the courtroom floor, ignoring his lawyers, ignoring the press. He stopped in front of her. He looked at the woman in the cheap blazer who had just saved his life. "You came back," he said softly. "I promised," Sarah said, her eyes filling with tears of relief. "I told you. He's just scared. And so were you." Dominic reached out, and, for the first time, he didn't check who was watching. He pulled Sarah into a hug. It wasn't a polite hug. It was desperate. He buried his face in her hair. "Thank you," he choked out. The judge banged the gavel one last time. Custody remains with the father. Case closed. But as the officers dragged a screaming Isabella out, she locked eyes with Sarah. "You think this is over?" Isabella hissed. "You don't know who you're dealing with. The trust fund. It's not just money. It's the key. You'll never be safe." The doors slammed shut. Sarah shivered. The threat hung in the air, cold and sharp. They had won the battle, but as she looked at Dominic, now holding a sleeping Henry who had been brought in by social services, she realized the war might just be starting. The ride back to the Vance Spire was silent, but it wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence of before. It was the quiet of a battlefield after the ceasefire has been called. The rain had stopped, leaving the Chicago streets glistening under the streetlights like veins of gold. When the elevator doors slid open to the penthouse, the air felt different. The sterile ozone smell was gone, replaced by the faint, comforting scent of the lavender laundry detergent Sarah had insisted on buying for Henry's blankets. Dominic carried Henry. The baby was fast asleep, his cheek pressed against his father's chest. For the first time, Dominic held him, not like a fragile bomb about to detonate, but like a treasure he knew how to protect. Sarah followed them in, suddenly feeling the weight of the last 24 hours crash down on her. She was wearing oversized shoes borrowed from Badger, a blazer that was 2 sizes too big, and she hadn't slept in nearly 2 days. She stopped in the foyer, unsure of her place. The contract was void. The investigation was over. Technically, she was just a guest again. "I should go," Sarah whispered, her voice cracking. "I need to. I have a shift at the restaurant tomorrow, if they haven't fired me already." Dominic froze. He turned slowly, careful not to wake the baby. His blue eyes, usually so cold and guarded, were wide open. Raw. "You're leaving?" he asked. "The job is done, Dominic. Isabella is in jail. Henry is safe. You know what to do now. Throw away the bear. Check the bottles." She tried to smile, but it felt brittle. "You don't need a waitress anymore." Dominic walked over to Mrs. Higgins, who was standing by the nursery door, looking equally shaken by the news reports. He passed the sleeping baby to the housekeeper. "Put him down, please, Mrs. Higgins, and throw out everything Isabella ever brought into this house. Toys, clothes, blankets. Burn them." "Yes, sir," Mrs. Higgins said, her voice trembling with emotion. She looked at Sarah and gave a small, genuine nod of respect before disappearing into the nursery. Dominic turned back to Sarah. He crossed the marble floor in 3 long strides. "You think this was about a job?" he asked, his voice low. "Wasn't it?" Sarah hugged the blazer tighter around herself. "You hired me to find a problem. I found it." "You saved my son," Dominic said. "And you saved me. Do you have any idea what would have happened if you hadn't walked into the Gilded Lily that night? Isabella would have won. I would have believed I was a monster. I would have let her take him. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face, before gently tucking a stray lock of hair behind her ear. His fingers were warm. "The police called while we were in the car," Dominic said. "They checked the wreckage of Veronica's car. The brake lines had been cut. Precision cuts. Isabella didn't just want custody, Sarah. She killed my wife. She's been planning this takeover for years. She wanted the Vance fortune, and Henry was just the key to the vault." Sarah shuddered. "I'm so sorry, Dominic." "Don't be sorry," he said fiercely. "Be here. Stay." "Stay?" Sarah blinked. "As the nanny?" Dominic let out a short, breathless laugh. "No, not as the nanny. I can hire a dozen nannies. I can hire the entire staff of Norland College. I don't need a nanny. I need someone who sees the truth. I need someone who isn't afraid of the dark." He took a step closer, invading her personal space, but this time it wasn't intimidating. It was magnetic. "You saw the man behind the CEO," he whispered. "You saw the father when everyone else saw the Ice King. Sarah, I don't want you to go back to that restaurant. I don't want you pouring water for people who don't even look at your face." "I have to finish nursing school," Sarah argued weakly, though her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Finish it," Dominic said. "Finish it here. I'll build you a library. I'll buy the hospital if that's what it takes. Just don't leave us." Sarah looked up at him. She saw the exhaustion etched into his features, but also a new light, a hope that hadn't been there 3 days ago. She realized then that the Vance spire wasn't a fortress to keep people out. It was a lonely tower waiting for someone to let the light in. "I can't be bought, Dominic," she said softly. "You know that." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm begging." The billionaire, the man who commanded thousands of employees and moved markets with a phone call, dropped to one knee. Not to propose marriage, it was too soon for that, but to offer something more profound. Surrender. He took her hands in his. "Help me raise him," Dominic said. "Help me make this a home instead of a museum. Stay." Sarah looked down at him. She thought of her tiny apartment with the leaking radiator. She thought of the aching shifts at the restaurant. And then she thought of Henry, sleeping peacefully in the next room, and the man kneeling before her, who looked at her as if she were the only source of oxygen in the room. "Okay," she whispered. Dominic exhaled, a sound of pure relief. He stood up and pulled her into his arms. This time he didn't hold back. He kissed her. It was a kiss that tasted of rain, exhaustion, and promises kept. It was desperate and tender all at once, sealing a pact that no contract could ever define. 6 months later, the headline on the Chicago Tribune, lying on the kitchen island, read, "Heiress convicted, Isabella Thorne, sentenced to life, without parole for sabotage and attempted murder." Sarah barely glanced at it as she poured coffee. She was wearing a silk robe, no more scrubs, no more waitress uniform, and studying a thick textbook on pediatric neurology. "Morning," a voice rumbled. Dominic walked into the kitchen, buttoning his cuffs. He looked rested. The dark circles were gone. He leaned over and kissed Sarah on the temple. "You're up early," he said. "Henry has a playdate at 10. Sarah smiled. "And I have a final exam at 2. "You'll ace it," Dominic said, stealing a sip of her coffee. "You're the smartest person in this house, and that includes the AI security system Badger installed." A gurgle from the high chair interrupted them. Henry was sitting there, smashing a banana into his tray with joyous enthusiasm. He was chubby, rosy-cheeked, and loud, but it was a happy loud. He looked at Dominic and banged his spoon. "Da!" Henry shouted, Dominic grinned. He walked over and picked up his son, ignoring the banana mush that smeared onto his expensive suit jacket. "Hey, buddy, you ready to conquer the world today?" Henry giggled, burying his face in Dominic's neck. There was no flinching, no fear, just pure, unadulterated trust. Sarah watched them, her chest swelling with a warmth that felt permanent. She remembered the night she had whispered into the screaming baby's ear at the restaurant. "He's just scared," she had said. She had been right. They had all been scared. Dominic terrified of failing, Henry terrified of the pain, and Sarah terrified of never being seen. But fear was a shadow, and shadows couldn't survive when you turned on the lights. Dominic turned to her, holding their son. "Ready to go?" Sarah closed her textbook. She looked at the city skyline through the glass walls. It didn't look cold anymore. It looked like a canvas. "Yeah," Sarah said, standing up and walking toward her family. "I'm ready." She wasn't Sarah the waitress anymore. She wasn't even just Sarah the nurse. She was the one who whispered to the monsters and made them go away. And that was a title she would keep forever. Wow. From a screaming baby in a restaurant to a courtroom showdown exposing a murderer. Sarah's story proves that sometimes the most important thing you can do is trust your instincts. Most people would have just ignored the crying baby and kept walking. Sarah didn't. She saw the pain that everyone else missed, and because of her courage, she didn't just save a billionaire's reputation. She saved a child's life and brought justice for a grieving family. It makes you wonder, how many secrets are hiding in plain sight, just waiting for someone brave enough to whisper, "I see you"? What would you have done in Sarah's shoes? Would you have risked your job to tell a billionaire he was wrong? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice, romance, and karma, please smash that like button, share this video with a friend who loves a good drama, and hit subscribe so you never miss a story. We have plenty more real-life twists coming your way. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.